Well, we've been told that Australia will become a nation of renters, but it's a pretty hard sell for most of us who still dream of owning our own home. It's not the case for our next guest, though. He's made a fortune from rentvesting and says it can be the way to financial freedom. Please welcome property expert Chris Gray from Your Empire to explain how it works. Nice to see you. I love this. You own a Lamborghini, but you still rent your home. How does that work?
A purple.
And the Lamborghini actually goes up in value.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a whole other segment.
I'll come back on next week.
Yeah.
So I've had it for 7 years and it's risen in value.
Wow.
But the property.
How do you justify that, though, that you can afford a Lamborghini but you're still renting your
I should
own
maybe
home?
get 2 or 3 because then I'd had 3 cars going up. So the whole idea about the renting thing is most people can't afford where they want to live. Whether you're 20 or you're 40 or you're 50, whatever you earn, most people can't afford the house they want. So the whole idea is it's almost like monopolies. You buy lots of those little ones. So think about a 2-bedroom Bondi. In the middle of summer, everyone's queuing to rent it, so the rent goes up. But if you want to rent a $3, $4, $10 million home, no one can afford to rent it, so the price goes down. So the numbers work is whatever you can afford to buy, you can actually rent somewhere 3 times more expensive.
Oh. So let's go through those numbers again, because I read it this morning. I had to read it twice. So you actually live where you want to but can't afford to, but you buy where you can afford and rent it out and let that rent pay for your other, but that goes up in price because capital gains, there's no capital gains on your own home.
Sure. So...
Where did I get it wrong?
So the main thing is rent money is only dead money if you don't invest the equivalent somewhere else. So you've still got to buy it. So if you just rent, that's bad news. But if you keep buying these little ones, the rental on the little ones is quite often maybe 4 or 5%, whereas the rental on a very expensive one's only about 1 or 2% because people can't afford it. So that's the arbitrage, is lots of little ones make more sense than having the one big family one.
So where have you invested? Which
so
parts of Australia?
A lot of it's around eastern suburbs in Sydney, so around the Coogis, Bondis, Tamaramas, and over in the UK, which I came from. And then I live in Darling Point.
On the harbour.
And you still rent? And you've been doing this for how long?
For 10 years, so now we've...
Do you move a lot?
We used to, but then when we got in the mindset of rather than dread moving, we're going to assume we move, then suddenly we've been in the same place for 7 or 8 years. And people said, my accountant said, when you get married, things will change, and obviously they do change, but that didn't change the thing. And when you have kids and they go to school, it still hasn't changed.
So you started with 1 property, though.
Yeah.
You left work. You were at...
so I got up to 6 by then. So I got 1, and then I used 1 to get into the 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th.
So just give us an idea of the money on the first, OK? Here you are, you've got 1 property, you're renting.
Yeah.
How much rent were you paying?
I know, so to start I bought my own ones, but what I worked out at 22 was I only earned £10,000, and normally you could borrow 3 times your income, but I borrowed 7. So rather than have a 1-bedroom studio, I bought a 3-bedroom house, rented 2 rooms out, and I lived for free. So my whole life I've lived for free because 1 bedroom's super expensive, but a 3-bedroom's twice as much, but you can rent the rooms out and live for nothing. So all of this stuff is completely opposite to the way we've been brought up.
Clever.
Would you be in trouble if the market tanks?
So the whole idea is you still have cash and you have that in your offset account to help pay for anything. But with the downturn in Sydney the last few years, those little kind of $1 million Bondi ones haven't really dropped, maybe 5%. Whereas a $3 or $4 million home could be changing 20 or 30%.
Yeah.
So it's actually even safer to have lots of little ones, and the banks prefer it that you have 3 or 4 properties rather than the 1 big family home.
Now, you've actually shared some rules for choosing an investment property when it comes to rent vesting. Let's go through them. Buy in the best location you can.
So you don't need to be a genius. So I'm not that clever, but it's the basic rules: location, location, location. We've all heard it, but people forget about that and they don't do it.
Right.
So rather than buy the beautiful property in the ugly location, get the ugly property in the best location, because you can always change ugly later on.
Buy around the median price range.
Yeah, so what that means is if you're buying around the average price, everyone can afford to rent it or to buy it, so you've got lots of buyers. Hence the Bondi type thing.
Got it.
There's always someone that will rent it.
Choose a property type based on the local demographic. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so in Sydney, normally I buy a unit, because that's what the average person lives in for the average property price. In Melbourne, I'd have a villa or a townhouse. Anywhere else in Australia, live in a house, because that's what the average person wants to live.
OK.
Wow.
What about this? Treat it like an Excel spreadsheet, not something you might live in one day.
Know.
You've lost me now.
Because investing can be so emotional. Now, what's the one thing accountants haven't got?
Emotion.
Emotion, exactly.
Yeah.
So when it comes to marriage, you want to be emotional, but when it comes to property investing, you want to be like that accountant.
And finally, always get an independent valuation.
Yeah, this is the funny thing is everyone gets so engrossed in the property and they fall in love with it, and they'll just pay based on what the agent's telling them. For something like $500 or $600, you can pay an independent expert to come and value the property to make sure that you're not overpaying for it.
You made a great little comparison in the ad break that it's a bit like playing Monopoly. What do you mean by that?
So the idea is have lots of those little green houses, which in Sydney would be a unit or anywhere else a little house, because people land on them all the time and they're reasonably cheap to buy. But then you go and rent the hotel on Mayfair or Park Lane, which is super expensive, but the rent's dirt cheap.
And you still do that today?
Yeah.
You do not live in your own home?
So I'm in Darling Point, and I'll rent...
Which is fairly flash for the rest of Australians.
So the rent doesn't even cover their strata fees, let alone their land tax or $1 of their mortgage.
Mm.
Wow.
Wow.
Very clever.
How much was the garage for the Lamborghini? That would have been another
2 or 3.
Another chunk.
And the great thing is about our building, it's full of such old people they can't drive, so I can rent all their garages. So I've got quite a few cars, but I can rent the garages.
Oh my gosh! If you want to find out more about rentvesting, you can download a free copy of Chris's book at yourempire.com.au. Chris Gray, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.